Well, thank you everyone for having me. My name is Melanie, and I do want to just share some of my experience about memory loss out of after a brain injury. And for any of you Daft Punk fans out there, I feel like this album covers could be a cover for my life right now because it is just random access to memories. It feels like I have limited access to my own past, and what's there is controlled by someone else. So there's definite issues to work through with this, but I think it's something that I've learned to manage fairly well so far, even though it's not without difficulty. So one of the things I look at when you first come back, when you discover you've had brain damage. So my seizure started back in 2016, and that's when we discovered I had a hippocampal sclerotic lesion. Tried on medications for a while, wasn't able to help. So I had surgery January 30th, 2020. And yes, I am almost 1 year seizure free. So I'm on a roll and I'm hoping to stay that way. But it was really interesting coming back, and Will Smith definitely had the right idea in Men in Black because you do not know if your memories are gone until somebody else points it out. So, a friend of mine actually had told me I lived with her for 6 months, and I thought she was joking because I had absolutely no memory of that, but turns out it was true. So, until someone points that out, those missing ones are not there at all. So, not everything is completely missing, and that's really part of the randomness that is hard to explain to other people. Some of the pieces of memory stay relatively intact, but a lot of it kind of blurs over time, and I'm left with a basic outline of events and kind of the general impression of whether it was fun or not. So when I try to explain things to people, I let them know memory doesn't all work the same way. So for me, the facts and skills I need to work and function are safely filed away, can be retrieved at will. But what's missing are the details of my personal life experiences. So, in other words, I would write a very short and very vague autobiography. So, at first, finding out that I was missing part of my memory was upsetting, but really mostly just the idea of not knowing myself. But then I realized I was still me with or without the missing chapters. And it's actually kind of hard to mourn over something that I never knew existed. And after I started getting back with friends and family that I wasn't as close with before, I realized it's definitely harder on the people around me who feel forgotten. So I felt I was managing really well until I went back to work. And that kind of felt like stepping into someone else's life because some things were familiar, others completely foreign. And I spent the first few months trying to figure out who these people were that I was working with and who I was to them, and just about drove myself crazy until my support human saved me because he stopped and just said, trying to figure out how things were before is a waste of time. It doesn't matter. Take the opportunity for this to actually be a fresh start without all the old baggage. So that really helped me reframe things and turn things around, but certainly didn't mean that it was all smooth sailing. And a lot of the issues that I run into are how people react to me when I don't remember some of our shared experiences. So, annoyance, anger, sadness, pity. I try to explain that I don't get to choose what I remember. And it doesn't mean that I don't think our shared experience is important. And after a while, I've recognized that I can't control their responses. I can only kind of control how I react in the situation. So, what can be more difficult then is trying to navigate through the uncertainty of not being able to trust my own mind. So, I come into those situations and I think, should I know this person? Or are we actually meeting for the first time? Did I make this up? did it really happen? Or, yeah, is my brain just making things up? This is one of the toughest things to deal with because I actually can't tell the difference between like what I would say is a true memory and something my mind created to fill in the gaps. Um, and sometimes this can create problems when people think that I'm lying to them, but it's not something that I actually have um, any way to differentiate. So being able to figure out, is this something that's real or something that I've created to fill in those gaps, can be really, really challenging for me. So not being able to trust myself, sometimes I do realize it is better to just smile and nod and recognize I have literally no idea what they're talking about, and that's okay. And even with all that, some days I do look like poor Mr. Spock on the table because things are hard and I'm trying really hard. Things that kind of make it more hard is I'm working with people who know my situation, want to be helpful, but there's a lot of things happen regularly that are not helpful. So for some reason, people seem to consider or don't consider that comparing for getting their coffee to me losing years of my life might be an insensitive comparison. And I've had people argue with me that I do remember something when I don't, and really no amount of yelling will ever change that. So even though some days I feel like pulling my hair out, I have come up with a few tips and tricks to make life easier. So the first one I realized is support humans are great. It is amazing to have someone you can be totally honest with, and no matter how crazy it is, they take it in stride and still talk to you the next day. It is also essential to have a fact checker. Fact checkers are a lifesaver. So when I can't trust myself or anyone else, it is nice to have someone I do trust that I can ask, is that really what happened? And know that I'm actually getting a straight answer. I've also learned that just because someone else wants to talk about it doesn't mean I have to, and it's okay to walk away. So someone might want to revisit the good old days, but I don't have to do that. And it took me a while to be able to recognize, yeah, you know what? I need to give myself a break because just because they want to talk about it doesn't mean that I have to. It also helps, I find it helpful anyway, that I know I'm doing my best each day for that specific day and for my friends and family. And I'm sure they are probably really happy that I can't hold a grudge and some things are forgotten. So that second chance on its 10th run is still looking pretty good. And of course, great advice from the wisest bear I know reminds me that in the end, none of this is my fault. I haven't actively forgotten anything. It's just that some things I don't remember. So I'm hoping sharing just a little bit there is helpful, maybe for some of you who've gone through this or are going through this, or friends or family of people who are, that maybe you can avoid some of those things that aren't so helpful, and just recognize people do the best they can. So if you have questions, just remind me that I did this because I certainly won't remember this presentation later, but I'd be happy to help out however I can. Thanks again for listening, everybody.